BYOZ, bring your own zafu. It's inflatable, so my wife, Nirakula, who's our videographer, and I travel a lot, so we bring a portable zafus wherever we go. This is a very necessary environment because the human spirit needs renewal, especially when there are environments that we go through that tend to add stress. And in stress we can then become externally focused and forget about who we actually are, which is something that's so amazing. The ancient wisdom texts that I quote from sometimes are called nigama. Gama means to go and ni means within. And they advocate that it may be the frontier that we haven't yet looked at inside. It's worth looking at, they say. And they also give this general advice is what you are is more important than what you have. What you have will come and go, but what you are is permanent. It's always there, waiting for you. How many of you are used to doing chanting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'd be a good idea to have a meditation because I'm still feeling very mellow. If we have a little kirtan, try to deepen that experience. Sound vibration is mentioned in the, I'll keep saying this phrase, ancient wisdom texts that we refer to. They're spiritual guidance passed down by sages, passed down by long-time practitioners, come to us in practical ways. You may have heard of the Yoga Sutras. There's also Bhagavad Gita. One of our favorites is Srimad Bhagavatam, because it talks about the beauty of the spiritual world and what's within the aesthetic of yoga. It's the highest level of yoga when we're able to experience unbridled gratitude. And Bhakti is sometimes described as the yoga of gratitude and love. Have you heard that before? You need more volume? So before we chant, we'll just say prayer. To my teacher, who taught me the chanting of this mantra in 1973. And I was able to be with him for around 4 years. He left the world in 1977. But he left behind him a wealth of his teachings through his books, which he left behind, prolifically wrote, in fact 70 books within about 12 years. And I also offer my respects to the great teacher Caitanya, who 500 years ago, as a barefoot monk, traveled throughout India and introduced the process of Bhakti Yoga, going door to door and teaching people that it doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what style you have, you don't have to change any of that. His point was, change the vibration in your life. And just as you may notice, if you have ever been to a movie, have you ever been to a movie? There's always a few times, long time ago. They have a soundscape. You can tell what the mood of the movie is by hearing the sound. I also found out in research I'm doing for another book I'm writing, but it's for the so-called silent movies weren't silent. They were always accompanied either by a live pianist or organist, because we need sound to give us context. And there's a soundscape in our lives. And there's a saying that I like, if you don't like what you're being subjected to, anybody? In any part of your life, do you not like what you're being subjected to? Just say yes to go along. Then change the subject. That's our free will, to change the subject. And one of the ways that the great yogis have taught to change the subject is change the sound vibration. Upgrade the sound, upgrade your life, because it upgrades your consciousness. And one of the statements in the ancient wisdom text is anavriti shabda, and that is, by sound vibration you can reach full consciousness, become uncovered. You guys are such great singers. It's amazing. It's not fair. Everyone moved up to Canada who can sing. My book is called The Four Questions. And I'm fascinated by language, which means I'm also fascinated by punctuation marks. And it's my decision or opinion that the most powerful of all punctuation marks in any language is the question mark. If you think about writing somebody an email, you can put in 10 pages, but if you don't put a question mark, they don't have to write you back. But if you just even send a question mark, they have to write you back. Like, what? Question mark is known by rhetoricians as powerful in conversation, in that whoever's asking the questions is leading the conversation. It's counterintuitive, because oftentimes I think if I'm telling somebody, then I'm putting my point across. But the Socratic method, there's a way in which, by asking questions, I'm leading the conversation, hopefully, to a helpful end. And in the ancient wisdom text, I've always been fascinated by, and it was the first Sanskrit verse I ever read from the ancient literatures, from a book that is foundational for all the teachings. Many of you know the Upanishads, or know that there are such books, which are a deliberation on what's most important in our lives. Because there are other parts of these ancient literatures that talk about how to live in harmony with the world, how to situate yourself well, how to be healthy, Ayurveda. There's martial arts, there's many directions about how to live life in this world. But then come the Upanishads that started a hint saying, and by the way, Upanishad in Sanskrit means sit up close, because now you're going to hear something that's better than anything you've ever heard before. Upanishad, like lean in, this is important. And they start talking about the difference between the energies of the world, that there's a categorical difference between matter and consciousness. Even in modern science now, it's called the hard problem of consciousness, because we can't measure it with the same tools that we measure matter. There's no controlled experiment for consciousness. It defies all that. And it's the same opinion in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says there are lower energies he calls earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then he said, aha, but beyond that, there's an energy that's far superior, and that's consciousness. And who is that? It's you. right now you're looking at me, I'm looking at you, and there's something happening, and if you try it on the freeway when you're driving and look at somebody next to you, they'll be like, what are you looking at me for? It's not electricity, it's not light, but it's consciousness. And we project ourselves. In fact, there's a saying I've kept with me for years, never got the tattoo, but where attention goes, energy flows. And Krishna says it in the Bhagavad Gita also. We project ourselves into matter by looking at it. He says, Dhyayato vishayam pumsam sangasteshu bhajayate, which means that when you look at something and you think, hey, maybe that could be mine, then suddenly you have a sangha, you have a connection with it. But actually you don't have any real connection with it because it's a completely different energy than you are. But we're intertwined with the material world because of our fascination with it. And that stands to reason because the Bhagavad Gita says that this world, with all its variety and all its beauty, is a reflection of a more substantial world. Socrates talked about that also, and Plato. And the Upanishads say the same thing, and they say, if you want to make a study of our source, then study yourself. Look inside and find out a little sample of where you come from. Our original, conscious, divine source, as is described in the Vedas, ancient wisdom texts. So coming to the verse I read, it's in a book called the Vedanta Sutra. Sutra means compressed, like a zip file. It takes all the information from these thousands and thousands of statements from the Upanishads, and then it puts it into concise form, so concise that you have to expand it. And it's been done hundreds of times by great philosophers who have taken each one of the statements called a sutra, and they've written volumes on it. The book I mentioned earlier, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is actually a commentary on those sutras, and it's 18,000 verses. But the first sutra in the book says this, Atato Brahma Jignasa, which means now is your time to inquire. And who is it speaking to? Very specifically those who have a human body, because it says that human body is specifically designed to ask questions. But what kind of questions? Because everyone's asking questions. Even in the morning time, you'll notice that the birds wake up and start asking questions. I'm not exactly sure what they're saying. But they want to know stuff too. And there's conversations going on everywhere. So the Vedanta Sutra directs us and says, ask a bigger question than you've ever asked before. Don't be afraid, it's saying, because we're used to, at least I am, as a kid, I used to ask this very annoying question to my parents. Why do I have to die? Although they were very kind to me through my whole life, and they were decidedly, educated people. They taught in college and everything like that, but they didn't know the answer to that question. And I could tell when I was a kid, because the answers they gave me. I remember one night, my brother and I stayed in the same room, and we started talking as we were falling asleep. I said, what do you think death is anyway? And my brother said, you just become nothing. And I said, I don't like that at all. I said, I don't want to die. And he said, I don't want to die either. And then we were just kids, so we whipped each other into a frenzy practically. And we ran out of our room into the living room. My parents were still awake talking, and he said, we don't want to die. And I said, what happened? They thought maybe we accidentally drank some cleaning fluid or something. And when they realized that it was all philosophical, they calmed us down. They gave us warm milk and honey, and they said, it's okay. And I said, yeah, but what about the question? I don't want to, about death. And they said, don't worry, it's a long way off. And I went to sleep thinking, I don't care if it's a long way or a short way, besides how do they even know? but it vexed me. And the ancient wisdom text says, ask this question. Don't be afraid that you're going to get another insufficient answer, because, and this is key, there will be a response. And we're used to this because, you know, sometimes the way we talk, say, I needed a new car, and I told the universe. Have you ever heard that? Yeah, I put it out to the universe. Here's my car. That's a thing. That's a real thing in the Vedas. There is a response to everything we do. That's karma. An exact response, and it's perfectly tuned. I don't know it. Just because my life's out of control in my mind doesn't mean the world's out of control. It's acting perfectly. And to every question we ask, there's a response. And in fact, the way it's described is, we have an original conscious, a bigna means fully conscious source that we come from. Just as we're conscious now, and you can look around and experience that everyone's conscious in here, because they'll look back at you like, don't look at me. And our original source, we're little samples of that. So what's the source like? Abhigna means fully conscious and aware and responsive. So this is the underlying premise of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Upanishads, is when you put a question out as a, if it sounds better, to the universe, the answer is forthcoming. So therefore it's inviting. Say, don't worry, it's okay, you can ask the question. So ask it now when you have the opportunity. And it says, Brahma Jignasa, find out what the greatest thing is, what your highest good is. Don't settle. Don't take the status quo. There's much more available to you. Atato means, therefore you've tried everything else. You've been in many species of life. They're talking to us as conscious beings that traverse the universes and go into different types of bodies. But now you've landed in a favorable place, a human body. It's specifically equipped to ask the question. The 4 questions are a summary of the important questions that are mentioned in the ancient literatures, and I find them an extremely useful tool, because there's a default mode in my mind when something happens. It goes in a different direction, and if you make with your finger a question mark in the air, how is it? It's like this. It's like a hook. You can pull your mind back, and you can also pull the answers closer to you. The question mark is so powerful. Just as when I write you an email and I write a question, you probably write me back. And in the same way, when you ask a question very sincerely, the answer will come. And do you know the principle of Occam's razor? Who knows Occam's razor? What is it? Do you know what it says?
Usually the simplest explanation is the most.
Perfect. Exactly. That's exactly it. And so there's all these ideas about spiritual practice and various religions and so forth, but the Vedanta Sutra are very practical. Say, you're human. The spiritual practice is ask the biggest question, who am I? And the first question in the book is, what's my purpose? And an example that my teacher used to give of finding our purpose was that of a tiny screw. And that is, when a screw is in a machine that it's meant to assist, it's mighty. It's got a real purpose. It's noble. It's doing something very valuable. If the tiny screw falls out onto, what street are we on? Ossington, that's a cool name. Just say you're walking home tonight and you happen to notice a tiny little screw on the sidewalk in Ossington, and you pick it up. You may feel a little sorry for it. You say, what happened to you? You used to be so useful. And then you might think, well, I'll sell it on eBay, this little screw. And then you'll look up on eBay and say, no, you're not going to get anything for a tiny screw. It's not worth anything. You won't even get a penny. But if it's back in the machine, then it becomes noble, mighty, useful. So knowing what my purpose is, say the ancient Vedas, immediately revives my vitality, because when I'm aligned, and that's what yoga means. Yoga really means alignment, reconnected with our purpose. So asking that question, and in the book I talk about practical ways in which one can come to discern one's purpose in life. Second question is, how may I be of service? Why don't you try saying that? Asking the question, just say it. How may I be of service? Yeah, if you have a housemate or a partner you live with, or whatever, when you go home tonight, try that out. See how the mantra works. Walk in. How may I be of service? Wait a minute, who are you? The ancient wisdom texts say, just like the little screw has a purpose. Perfect alignment when we're serving. And when we're serving, we're insiders in the universe, not outsiders. The outsiders are the ones who are trying to become the masters of the world, and it never works because we get dominated by material nature. Even when we figure it out, for instance, you can figure out technology, how to build a television, and then you end up sitting in front of it for 7 hours a day. We can't dominate nature because it's divine, actually. It's more powerful than we are. We're part of it, but we're a small part. But when we come into the alignment of our nature, which is to serve, that is, everything that we have is paraphernalia that can be used in service. And you survey history and you'll notice that those who had this service mood, they tried to help the most people. They end up being the most noteworthy and considered to be the highest minded of people. Contrary to we are often taught that we want to become masters, control nature, control others, and so forth. When we serve, we're at our best. I'll give you one quick example. That is, if you go to an event that you've been invited to, but you feel awkward, that's the setup for it. Have you ever been to a social event at which you felt awkward? Only two of you? Even going home sometimes for the holidays, it's like, I don't know who's going to be there. My brother, he always brings this up. Or it's, let's say you went to an event, you didn't know anybody, plus you didn't exactly know how you were supposed to dress. Have you ever thought that when you're walking in the door? I thought that when I walked in tonight. I was like, am I overdressed or underdressed? And, you know, say you go in and you don't know who to talk to, like you're not sure if you dressed, maybe everyone else was supposed to wear white and you're wearing red, whatever it is. But then you see over on the side, now that you're in that desert, social desert, you see somebody over there, it looks like they work there, they're helping set up, and you go over and say, how may I be of service? And they say, oh yeah, thanks. Could you help me move those chairs from there to there? And you start unfolding chairs. How do you feel now? Safe. You got some shelter. And what's more, when other people walk in, they go, oh yeah, that guy works here. If you need to ask anything, ask him. Because you just went into your natural environment, which is to be serving. And there's a way in which in the universe, these ancient wisdom texts say, that's our natural proclivity, and that's where we're aligned in heart and soul and mind. When we're looking at things, rather than how can I dominate it, how can I capture it, how can I keep it, you think, how can I use it in service? And when we do that, even on the level of, I'm just trying to serve in this one little area, we suddenly feel noble. Our heart opens up. And this mantra is so powerful. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that if you use this wherever you go and in all circumstances, then you live like a lotus. And what does that mean? It means that the lotus, which is called Padmaja, it grows out of mud. Padma means mud, by the way, and Ja means to be born. So a lotus flower, arguably, one of the most beautiful flowers or any creation in the world, it grows out of mud at the bottom of the water and it rests on the water at the top. However, lotuses are not muddy and they never get wet. That's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. If you have this mantra going in your head, how may I be of service, how may I use that in service? Big decisions to make. Where's the best place for me to do service? If you live your life like that, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you'll never be touched by the mayhem of the material world. Or it's a stickiness that gets on you like mango sap. Never get that in your hair. You won't get it out. There's no solvent for it. And that's the way the world is when we think, how can I control it? We think we're controlling it, but it sticks to us, and then we can't get it off. But Krishna says, live like a lotus. If you do this, ask the question, how may I be of service? You'll never be touched by the world. What's more, your heart will open, and that's how you feel complete happiness. The third question is, and this is a harder one. You ready for a hard one? I was throwing underhand pitches. Now it's going to come in fast. Are you ready?
Yes.
No baseball here? Cricket? Anyway, forget the sports analogies. I'll stick with flowers. So, the third question is, what's the lesson? If you're feeling courageous, why don't we say it together? 1, 2, 3. What's the lesson? Why do I say it's so hard? Because I feel I'm victimized in this world, pretty much constantly. And it's so hard to rise to this question when I feel victimized. And the default is, why me? Why would this happen to me? But if we change the metaphor of the universe and we say, this universe is a classroom, everything that happens to us is meant to teach us a lesson, to bring us to our full potential. That's the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the summary of that book I told you about. That's the summary of the Upanishads. So we're getting to the cream of the cream of the cream. And that's what it says. It says, if you can live in the world and use everything, I keep emphasizing that because so many of the things we happen, it's hard to reconcile. We say, why me, why me, why me? And curl up in a ball. But if you can develop the wherewithal and the strength to say, what's the lesson in this? Then the lesson will come. And how strong will you feel? How courageous will you feel venturing out into the world in all the awkward and oppressive situations that may come if I'm armed with this power to ask, what am I going to get from this? What's the lesson that I'm meant to learn from this? There's a lot more to be said about that, but I'm just giving a very quick summary. And finally, the last question can help you throughout the whole day long if you keep asking it. And that is, where am I investing my attention right now? Do any of you have any money? Or just see me afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. You know we have return on investment. That's called ROI. So in the Yoga Sutras, in the Bhagavad Gita, and the ancient wisdom texts, they say more important than your financial calculations of ROI is ROA. That's return on attention. Because that's our main asset. Wherever we place our attention, That's where we're going. Whatever we place our attention on, that's what we're accumulating. It goes right into us and we keep it. It becomes part of us. And therefore, I could ask a question that is should be on the SATs. Do you have SATs in Canada? That's an American thing. It's college entrance exams. Top score is 1600. So if you can answer this correctly, you'll get a 1600 on the SAT. What's a better investment of your attention? Doom scrolling mindlessly, does that work? Or reading a good book? Okay, who wants to vote for scrolling as a good investment of your attention? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is what one of the Upanishads says, Anyadeva hor sambhavat, anyadahora sambhavat. Profound observation is that one result is obtained by focusing your attention on your higher purpose in life, and a completely different result is obtained by wasting your attention. And when you ask this question, you'll notice that you're prompted, or you're prompting your mind to remember what's most important to me. And as conscious beings, when we reform ourselves to see where's the best place I can place my attention right now, you can get through a whole day in grand fashion by just adjusting that one aspect, which is the main aspect and our only asset ultimately, because that's what we have control over, where we place our attention. And those questions you could take with you wherever you go and practice asking them. And just as to finish the thought, I was listening to a radio interview and I heard this person who's well-spoken, highly successful person, and the interviewer, the person was from Oklahoma who was being interviewed. And in the course of answering and speaking, he said, yeah, well, I'm an Okie. And some people take that as a derogatory, calling an Oklahoman an Okie. And the interviewer said, oh, maybe you shouldn't say that. He said, but I am from Oklahoma. But then he checked himself. He said, that's all right. I live to be corrected. And if we take these questions as a way to self-correct, to find a way to realign, then the Vedanta Sutra says, go for it, because that's what you were meant for. And now we have no more time. Right? Thank you. It's been an honor to be here in your amazing space, and I was very touched by the meditation at the beginning. Thank you for presenting that. I think you're all very fortunate, and I feel doubly fortunate to have had the chance to come here and experience what apparently many of you are doing on a regular basis. Thank you.